3 games, that's all it takes. Just 3 Saturdays determine whether Indiana football is for real or 2024 is just a beautiful dream. Illinois, Iowa, Oregon, each one tougher than the last. If the Hoosiers survive this stretch, they're playoff contenders again. If not, the critics will be ready with their I told you so's. And so stick around, because today we're breaking down the gauntlet that could define the entire season here on the Hoosier Football Tailgate, right on thehoosier.com.
Walking them down. Woo! IU America. They got a football team now.
Hello again, everybody. I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith, and welcome to another edition of the Hoosier Football Tailgate, all on thehoosier.com, powered by On3. A great week of Big Ten football media days on task this week, with the Indiana Hoosiers kicking it off on Tuesday as Coach Cignetti brought Malik Kamara and Elijah Sherratt and Aiden Fisher to Vegas to talk Indiana football. And the Big Ten Media Days was a topic of discussion each and every day this week, because Sig is being Sig on the podium, letting know everyone from east to west, north to south, that the Indiana Hoosiers just adopt the SEC scheduling philosophy. And that rose up to a level that got the Twitter world up in arms. But as Signetti likes to say, he speaks to two bases: his fan base and his ball club. And that's the only 2 bases he cares about. So again, Big Ten Media Days with Sig, and another question and answer session with the Big Ten Roundtable that I found very, very refreshing as a former coach. Something that I probably wouldn't have said myself when asked the question, what is the most energetic thing about college game days? And I'm paraphrasing, and Cignetti said, and I quote, lining up and kicking somebody's ass. Well, that may not be something that I would have said as a former coach, or other coaches would have said, but this is the man that stood inside of Assembly Hall and called out Purdue, Ohio State, Michigan last year to get his fan base riled and let everyone know that Indiana was a new culture and football team. As we talked last week on our first edition of this the preseason look at the conference schedule, Indiana's first 3 ball games against non-conference 2 G5s and an FCS school, of which one of those G5s, Old Dominion, the first game of the season, will be quite a test for the Indiana Hoosiers. I believe that Old Dominion was picked 3rd to finish in their conference, a team that Coach Signetti and his staff are very familiar with. But last year, they went into South Carolina and gave South Carolina all they could handle, losing 23-19 at South Carolina. Not an easy place to go play and win on a Saturday afternoon in Columbia. So as we move through this segment of looking at the season, we're going to take care of some cleaning up of some of the things that happened today in the world of college football. Media at the before the Big Ten Media Days were rocking and rolling. The media picked Indiana to finish 6th in the Big Ten. Illinois was picked 4th, and Michigan was picked 5th in front of Indiana. Michigan, with a true freshman quarterback in Bryce Underwood, Their defense will be a very, very good defense as they were a year ago. We'll have to see how Bryce Underwood handles the Big Ten. Dylan Raiola last year was good at times and bad at times. So we'll have to see how Mr. Underwood handles that pressure that he will be under and the scrutiny he'll be under at Michigan. But Penn State has been the choice by the media to win the Big Ten Conference, with Ohio State and Oregon right there, with each of them receiving some votes. But consider this: Indiana picked second to last year to finish in a tie with Penn State for second and losing out on the tiebreaker, to now being picked sixth overall in the Big Ten. That in itself, a monumental jump in the eyes of the media. And you have to say that Indiana got the attention of everyone last season. Before we came on tonight, another thing that hit the wires, and I don't know how this will affect anything as it pertains to the NIL landscape. Remember, the rev share is not something that will be touched, or how that is divided up. That has already been settled. But the NIL, where the guardrails seem to come off at time to time. Today, the president signed an executive order that essentially follows what the College Sports Commission guidelines that they put out as it pertains to NIL and athletes having a viable business purpose for what they're being paid. And so the executive order kind of echoes that sentiment through the College Sports Commission. And remember, I said last week that the people that had filed the lawsuit a year ago, or a couple years ago, as it pertained to NIL, had threatened another one if the College Sports Commission didn't take down their guidance on that. Well, the president, I guess, kind of settled that today with his executive order. In that executive order as well was women's sports and non-revenue sports. That was also addressed. We'll have to wait and see what all happens on that front. But again, nothing like a little controversy to get us started here in July, right before we kick off the 2025 season, and what will be in another exciting year of Big Ten football. By all means, we want you to participate tonight. If you've got a question, comment, let us know. I'll be glad to put it up and have added. If I can give you a answer, I will do my best to give you that answer. But we want you to be involved, and I appreciate it very, very much. And as I've been going on with the tailgate here now on my third year, I believe, your participation in these lives is what keeps me wanting to do live broadcast. And I think that's one of the unique spaces that we're in. Not too many shows like the tailgate do this in a live fashion. Most of them are taped and they go through the editing process, and maybe sometimes I should, but try to be as raw as possible and bring it to you as it. But by all means, we want you to participate and give us anything that you have a comment about tonight, and just throw it up, and we'll be glad to give you an answer if we can find it. And hopefully you'll get an answer that is something that you wanted to actually hear an answer to, and not me running around the right end with something that maybe I'm showing off the cuff. But also, if you could do me a favor, as I've just thrown into the chat, please like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube channel, thehoosier.com. We appreciate it all a lot. And this is going to be something that goes a long way in promoting the channel, as well the different avenues of different shows that we have here on thehoosier.com. And as we said before, make sure you get that subscription, because the $1 first month, 50% off the rest of the year will soon be going away. So you're going to want to get that to get all the information, because Zach Brown and Colin McMahon have done a tremendous job covering the Big Ten this week in media days out there in Vegas. And we'll have to get them on to at some point to get their take on this week's game media days coverage out there. But they are on their way back, so hope those guys have safe travels. Jason like to know, what do I think is the biggest hole in Indiana's offense and defense? I really think there, Jason, the biggest thing is going to be off defensively is who makes up for what CJ West brought. Is it some of the guys they brought in? Because remember, Kamara is moving over to more of a stud backer. They got the kid from Maryland that's probably going to be in the rotation at the spot that Kamara occupied last year. So it's the defensive line outside of Kamara that will probably be the question mark heading into the season. Do I think they've got those questions answered with what they picked up via the portal? Yes, I do. I do think they picked up a lot of good defensive linemen in the portal, Wheeler being one of them. Another kid from Kent State, and his name is escaping me right now, but I do think they've got that. Offensive line-wise, I do think Indiana may have the best offensive line that they've had in, I don't even want to speculate. They probably go at least 8 to 9 deep along the offensive front. Getting Coogan was huge. There's no question about that. You got Carter Smith back. We've got the reports this week that Evans is ready to go. So everything is pointing in a positive direction along the offensive line. The only question maybe, and I lump this position in with the O-line, is the tight end position. Horton is going to be very difficult to replace. So we'll have to see how that develops as the year goes on, and we'll get a really good sense there in that first 3 weeks. As I've said, Old Dominion will be a tough task for Indiana week 1. And what they can do, as they went to South Carolina a year ago and lost 23-19. So in a game that I think they actually led at one point. So we'll have to wait and see on some of that as we go through it all with things like that. And then tonight, what we're going to do is look at the 3 games that I think will ultimately define Indiana's season, as well as CFP hopes, and that is the 3-game gauntlet of Illinois at home, at Iowa, and then all the way at Oregon. Those 3 games will have a huge bearing on this 2025 season. And of course, the Nittany Lions' large loom in November, if they get by those 3 gauntlets of games and can go into Happy Valley with maybe 1 loss, their chances of getting back in the college football playoffs are probably quite good. But we're going to talk about that here in a second and kind of get things rolling with that as we try to get this 2025 season on the roll as we get going here, as the team will be reporting here in another week. I believe next Wednesday is when they will report. We got the NFL full speed ahead with all the training camp and things of that nature already happening. And next is the Big Ten as they get all started, and the rest of college football gets started next week. And then, of course, high school football here in the state of Indiana gets rolling then a couple weeks later. So we are on the cusp of everything about the summer we love, the start of college football. And we're going to look at these 3 games here in a moment as we get rolling through tonight's broadcast. But again, we've kind of segmented it in 3s and purposefully done that. We talked about non-conference. Again, I don't want to belabor a point that Cignetti makes and all the criticism that is happening with the SEC and SIG and what he said and how he referenced it. He was just answering a question as honestly as he knows how. And if you look at what the SEC does, they have 4 non-conference games. 3 out of the 4 are against G5 and an FCS school. Their other conference games they have scheduled against conference rivals in the ACC, Big 12, and like this year, the Big 10 again as Texas plays Ohio State. And rightfully so, they should. They are two of the prominent teams in the college football landscapes. Alabama played Wisconsin last year. But what the Big 10 is trying to do, and I wholeheartedly agree, is the SEC should take that fourth game and quit trying to count it against a non-conference opponent, whether it be the ACC or Big 12, and acting as if it's another conference game. The fact of the matter is it's not. So play your 3 non-conference game, play 9 conference games so everybody is on the same scale, whether it's the Big 10, SEC, Big 12, or ACC, so that when everything is said and done, everybody can be looked at equally across the board when it comes to the number of conference games that's played, and let that be the measuring stick of each and every team in those conferences. As Sig said, there is always going to be that 1 or 2 teams that do not make it that are going to be upset with the results of the College Football Playoff Committee. It's just human nature. But he was just stating a fact that the majority of the big SEC, eliminating that 4th non-conference game, does the same thing Indiana does. 2 G5 schools and an FCS school, and then add in the games that they've done over the years where they've played an ACC school or a Big 12 school and some Big 10 schools. And I think Sig's also correct in saying that the Big 10 would be open to playing crossovers against the SEC if that's what so they choose. But again, I don't think Sig was actually making a dig or trying to be arrogant in his approach. I mean, it comes across maybe as that, but the fact of the matter is that's what the SEC does. So it's not like he's reinventing the wheel. So enough of that. We're going to get on here in a short bit, but let me first do this. We need to step aside and let one of our sponsors speak. BetUS is one of the best in the business when it comes to betting college football. We're going to have all their odds and things like that. But if you can, and you're looking to maybe open a betting account somewhere, give BetUS a try.
Hoosier Football Tailgate is sponsored by BetUS. Use promo code TAILGATE and get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first deposit. BetUS is where the game starts.
And we thank BetUS for their relationship as an affiliate of the Hoosier Football Tailgate. As again, anytime that anybody would open an account with BetUS, we do receive a little bit of a commission for that, or any of the other affiliates that you may choose to purchase something from. And if you do, it's a big thank you from us here at the Tailgate. And you can find some of those affiliates on the YouTube page or my Twitter page, because we have a link tree there that you can look and see what the affiliates that we work with, and be probably adding some new ones as we go ahead here in 2025. Once again, if you're joining us late, by all means, put any questions you may have into the box, and we'll try to answer it as much as we humanly can as we're going through here and get this thing on the road. But I want to start in with this 2025 season look as we get going here with everything. And it's one of those things that it's going to be a 3-game gauntlet. And last season's impossible start and the fact that it happened right here in the Big Ten, for those of us who bleed crimson and cream, it was everything. A team long known as a basketball school, a perennial afterthought on the gridiron, did the unthinkable. The Indiana Hoosiers, a program whose history was more known and defined by hope than hardware, crashed the college football playoff party last season, the Hoosiers didn't just knock the door. They kicked it in, finishing a Cinderella season with an 11-win season, something that hadn't been done since the Johnson administration. That event sent shockwaves through the entire sport. It was Indiana's Cinderella story, a magical, unbelievable run that captivated the nation. For one glorious autumn, Bloomington, Indiana was the center of the college. Was it a fluke? Was the 2024 season a fluke, as many in the college football world claim, write, tweet, all those things? And that's the thing that Indiana is going to have to understand, that that is the question that will define the 25 season for the Indiana Hoosiers. It's the ghost we have to chase, the narrative that have to rewrite. The entire college football world is watching and wanting to see if the glass slipper still fits, or if midnight is officially struck, and the answer won't be found over a full 12-game season. No, this year, the entire destiny of and their claim to legitimacy will be forged or broken in a brutal 3-game gauntlet. A Big Ten opener at home against Illinois, a team dreaming of its own playoff berth, a Cinderella story, 10-win season a year ago, and also after that, a trip to the black and gold of Kinnick Stadium, Curt led Iowa Hawkeyes to face a notoriously tough Iowa team, and then a cross-country flight for a showdown with a true national powerhouse, the Oregon Ducks. 3 games, 3 titanic struggles. This stretch will either solidify Indiana's place among college football's new elite or expose their magical 24 run as nothing more than a beautiful, fleeting mirage. So let's break it down. Let's exactly know how this 3-game gauntlet will make or break the Indiana Hoosiers' playoff dreams. And we're going to start that here in a second. But before we dissect the brutal road ahead, we have to understand that the miracle was, how did Indiana team that had been watching bowl seasons from the home from the last 3 years suddenly find itself standing shoulder to shoulder with the giants of the sport? In 2 words, Curt Cignetti. In his first year, Coach Cignetti engineered one of the most stunning turnarounds in modern-day football history. He inherited a program with a losing culture and immediately changed how everyone thought, from the players to the fans. He's an old ball coach, a throwback to a time discipline, accountability, and toughness were the only currencies that mattered. His philosophy, very simple. Get the right people on the bus, demand improvement every single day, and never, ever compromise your standards. As he says, it is what it is when it comes to what he expects on and off the field. Coach Signetti isn't an old school motivator. He's a master of a new school game. He treats the transfer portal like his own personal recruiting playground. He knew that when he came to Indiana to compete right away, he couldn't wait 4 years for high school classes to mature. He needed to win now. And so he went to work executing a complete roster overhaul that saw him bring in 54 new players a year ago, 30 of them from the portal. And he changed the face of Indiana football overnight. The results were staggering. The Hoosier offense, fired up by Signetti's aggressive playbook, came alive, shattering school records and hanging 40-point games on opponents with shocking regularity. The defense, a unit built with overlooked gems from the Mid-American Conference or other G5 schools, as James Madison, and a portal pickups, transformed into one of the nation's most formidable foe on every Saturday afternoon. They only lost 2 games all season. One to the national champions, Ohio State Buckeyes, and the other to the college football runner-up, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, that they lost on the road. It was by any measure the greatest season in the history of Indiana football, full stop. But greatness always brings scrutiny, and the architects of that miracle season are largely gone. Curtis Rourke is off to the NFL, and no one knew, including his teammates, that he had a torn ACL when the season was over. Nobody. That shows you his guts, and not a guy like NFL quarterback Anthony Richardson tapping out. Curtis Rourke did not let anybody know what ailed him for the better part of the 24 season. The team's two top running backs are gone. On defense, the veteran defensive tackles like CJ West, who clogged up the middle and let Kamara come off the edge and feast on quarterbacks, are gone too. In total, Indiana returns only 8 starters from that historic playoff team. This is where the fluke narrative gets its teeth. It's easy for critics to see the massive turnover and predict a hard crash back to earth for the Hoosiers. They see a team that caught lightning in a bottle, and they don't believe it can be caught twice. Signetti, for his part, is already trying to erase the memory of last season. At Big Ten Media Days, he already has ordered the pictures of himself from College Game Days and Big Noon Kickoff removed and taken down inside the facility, telling his team last year is done. Everything is earned, not given. He knows that sustaining success is infinitely harder than achieving it once. He proved that he could build a contender. Now he has to prove he has built a program. And that process starts with the first true test of 2025. The University of Illinois, led by Bret Bielema, will step into Memorial Stadium on September 20th when the Illinois Fighting Illini come to Bloomington. And this isn't just a Big Ten opener. It's a battle against a mirror image team. Illinois, the team, has many pundits that are picking them to be this year's Indiana, a tough, physical, well-coached squad posed to make its own surprise run at the playoffs. If you look at last year's record, they were 10-3, 6-3 in the Big Ten. Their over-under this year is 8.5. And head coach Bret Bielema is in his 5th season over there in Champaign-Urbana. And you can get a look at their coaching staff as we go through Illinois and what they bring to the table. Their 2 coordinators, Barry Lunney and Aaron Henry, both in their 4th and 5th years respectively. But after their breakthrough 24 season, they marked their best finish in over 2 decades. Illinois is no longer a conference doormat. They are a legitimate contender, and this game is a heavyweight fight to see who really belongs in the Big Ten's upper class. Bret Bielema, Illinois, plays like its coach played in his Big Ten days, with a big physical and smart presence. They want to own the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball and just wear you down. And here's the scary part for Illinois. Illinois returns a staggering number of starters, 16 to be exact. So this is a veteran ball club. This is a squad that knows how to win. Their entire starting offensive line is back, a unit that really started to gel late last year, as evident in their points per game offensively at 28.31 and 364 yards per game. They're there to protect their 3rd-year starting quarterback, Luke Altmyer, and clear the path for a deep running back room led by a healthy Caden Fegan. This offensive unit is built to control the clock and punish you. Defensively, Illinois is anchored by a legitimate stars. Outside linebacker Gabe Jacas is one of the best pass rushers in the conference, coming off an 8-sack season. And the secondary is deep and talented, giving up only 373 yards a year ago on defense and only 21.69 games or points per game last season. The secondary featuring 2 all Big Ten caliber safeties in Xavier Scott and Miles Scott. It's a team built from the inside out and a roster full of experience. But they aren't perfect. Their biggest question for Illinois is at the wide receiver position. They lost a whopping 69% of their receiving production last season, mostly to the NFL. They're counting on transfers like Hudson Clement from West Virginia to step in immediately to be that lack of proven top-end talent out at wide receiver is a potential weakness. Their defensive line is also retooling after some key losses, even with a boost from some Wisconsin transfers. For Indiana, this game is an absolute must-win at home. It's the conference opener against a team Indiana is directly competing with. A loss here would be a devastating blow to Indiana's playoff chances, and that narrative that Indiana built something sustainable. So what's the key for the Hoosiers? What is the key for Indiana when they look to play the Illini this season? And we're going to talk about that because it absolutely starts with Indiana having an offensive team that is going to be led by Fernando Mendoza, the Cal transfer, threw for over 3,000 yards last year behind a notoriously bad offensive line. Now he's an explosive throwing to one of the best receivers in the country, preseason All-American Elijah Surratt. The battle will be in the trenches. Our rebuilt offensive line featuring Notre Dame transfer Pat Kukin has to give Mendoza the time. If they can protect him, Mendoza and Surratt have the talent to go after the Illinois secondary. As is, the Elijah Surratts of the world will be surrounded by guys like Omar Cooper, who also can be a big key in this matchup. The second key is our defensive front 7 against the Illinois run game. Hoosiers lost 2 space-eating defensive tackles. The new guys have to prove they can hold their ground against that massive experienced Illinois offensive line. This is where a player like All-American linebacker Aiden Fisher becomes so important. He will need to be everywhere, filling the gaps to prevent Illinois from just bleeding the clock and slowing down the run. And force Altmyer into obvious passing downs. It lets Kamara, an All-American edge rusher, who was one of the nation's best and top leaders in quarterback pressures a year ago, do what he does best: get after that quarterback. This game will be war. It's a clash of 2 programs on the rise. For Indiana, it's the first big test for Coach Signetti's second season, part 2. It's a chance to prove to Memorial Stadium that Memorial Stadium is now one of the toughest places to play in the Big Ten. A win sends a message that 2024 was no fluke. A loss, though, gives life to the doubters and puts a mountain of pressure on the next, even tougher leg of this journey. And Indiana will definitely have to find ways against Illinois to win a football game against a team that will be evenly matched from the lines through the offensive skilled positions to the defensive secondary. This will be a battle of 2 teams that will be looking to upset the apple cart in the upper echelon of the Big Ten. And it happens right on September 20th in Memorial Stadium. It's important to the Hoosier Nation that the Memorial Stadium of old is what the Memorial Stadium of Purdue, Washington, Nebraska, Michigan, a full house, greets the Illini on September the 20th. So Illinois is a team that is definitely right now picked 4th in the Big Ten. 2 spots ahead of Indiana. And they have a over-under of 8.5 wins. Very similar to where Indiana's at. We'll talk more about how I see that game playing out here in a second. But we must move on to that next ball game that enters the fray. And that's going to be the Iowa Hawkeyes as we get ready for that big ball game coming up. Indiana's first road test of the year. And 7 days after that Illinois game, the Hoosiers have to pack their bags and head to Kinnick Stadium, one of the toughest teams and stadiums to play against on the road. It is a very difficult venue to play in when it comes to a team visiting Iowa on the road. That game on September 27th is where Indiana will face the Hawkeyes in Iowa City. If the Illinois game is a test of legitimacy, this game is a test of pure raw toughness, and winning at Kinnick was one of the hardest things to do in college football. It's a hostile sea of black and gold. Seems just to drain the life out of visiting teams. And for a program like Indiana, still trying to prove it can win big on the road, this will be the ultimate test for the Hoosiers in 2025. We all know that the Iowa Hawkeyes are about, for decades under Coach Curt. I believe this is like his 28th year in Iowa. They've been defined by a ferocious defense and, well, an offense that often has struggles. And 2025 looks to be more of the same. The genius of defensive coordinator Phil Parker is that even when he loses key players, their standard never drops. Iowa reloads its defense. It does not rebuild. They should have a rock-solid defensive line returning and a former 5-star recruits occupy at safety, and their identity has to be a sound, hard-hitting, wait for you to make the mistake football team. They don't give up big plays, and they live on turnovers. You can see the stats here by Phil Parker in his 14th season in Iowa City. Only 17 points, almost 18 points a game, 318 yards a game. Their defense is tough, and they are even tougher in Iowa City, as Indiana has had a hard time winning there throughout the years. And this will definitely be one of the biggest road tests for Indiana in the 2025 season. Their special teams are as always a weapon. They might have the best kicker, punter, returner trio in the country. Drew Stevens is their kicker. He's automatic. And their punter, Dakin, is the master of flipping the field, pinning 29 of his punts inside the 20-yard line last year. Against Iowa, you're fighting for every single yard. The question, as it's always in Iowa City, is about the offense. The Hawkeyes have brought in Mark Gronowski, a transfer from South Dakota State, where he's won 2 national titles at the FCS level with South Dakota State. Gronowski is a true dual-threat quarterback, a guy who can make things happen with his arm and his legs, a big change for Iowa's usual pro-style passer. They have to replace their all-Big Ten running back, but have a promising duo ready to step up behind the line, and that returns 3 starters, including all-Big Ten center Logan Jones. But here's the potential vulnerability for Iowa. Their secondary. After losing key players, there's a real question about who will be their shutdown corner. They were exposed through the air at times last year without a proven star out on the field. They could be a gettable for a high-powered passing attack. For Indiana, The path to victory at Kinnick is a tightrope walk, but it's a walk they can make. Ultimately, they have to protect Mendoza. Bottom line, they have to make sure that they protect the football, as an Iowa team lives off the turnovers. And Indiana was good in the turnover battle a year ago and points off of turnovers. Iowa's entire game plan is built on winning the turnover battle. A single interception fumble could be a death sentence in that stadium, as well as any type of special team play that gives Iowa an advantage. A kickoff return, a punt return, a block punt has the same recipe: disaster. Fernando Mendoza, who only threw 4 interceptions at Cal last season, has to be just as careful here. Second, we have to attack the questionable secondary. This is the game where Elijah Surratt, Bird, Omar Cooper, and other receivers need to win their one-on-one matchups. And Signetti has to be aggressive, taking calculated shots downfield as they did last year, especially with the back shoulder throw, to test those new Iowa cornerbacks. And if Indiana can hit a few big plays early, it can do what few teams have ever do: quiet the Kinnick crowd and force the Iowa offense to play from behind. In this ball game, the Brian Haynes-led defense has to make the new Iowa offense one-dimensional. The Hawkeyes want to run the ball to set up play action for Gronowski. The front seven has to stand tall again. If Indiana can contain the run and force Gronowski into 3rd and long, it puts a massive pressure on a quarterback still adjusting to the speed of the Big Ten defense. And Indiana's own star defensive back, D'Angelo Pons, will be a key in keeping Gronowski from scrambling for big gains. This game is a test of mental strength. Escaping Iowa City with a win will be monumental and a statement win. It's the kind of win that the playoff committee will notice. And that is very, very true when it comes to those type of games and wins for a team like Indiana. You can understand that winning in Iowa City will set up the rest of the schedule, and it will make the committee and all of college football take notice that the Hoosiers, if they win against Illinois and go into Iowa City and beat Iowa, that this team is no fluke. It has every chance of repeating potentially in the college football playoffs. As Derby wants to say, the Indiana Hoosiers will be unlikely to beat any of those 3 teams. Well, that's one way to look at it. There's no question that in college football, anything and everything can happen on any given Saturday, especially in the Big Ten. As we see every year, there are countless times where teams have gone into games as the favorite and a lock to win, only to come out with a shocking defeat because they lost the turnover battle, gave up big plays, and didn't do enough offensively to warrant a win. Now, we've broken down the Big Ten slugfest against Illinois and Iowa, and I'm going to give you my take on what it will be against those teams in terms of who wins and who loses. Those are 2 massive games. But before we get to the national powerhouse waiting for us in Oregon, I want to hear from you. Based on what you've heard so far, how do you see these two game stretch playing out? Can Indiana defend home turf against Illinois? Can they go to Kinnick Stadium and pull off an upset in Iowa City? Drop your predictions in the comments below. And like I said earlier, do me a favor, hit the like button and subscribe. It helps a ton. And now we're going to talk about the game that could change everything for the 2025 season. And Derby, I appreciate you stating what you stated. And while you feel Indiana may not win any of those 3 games, and the third one we're going to talk about here, certainly I value your opinion, and I thank you for watching the Hoosier Tailgate. October 11th is the trip out to Eugene. Indiana had faced Illinois and Iowa, and now they get the luxury of heading out to Oregon, a beautiful state, Aztec Stadium, and to meet the Dan Lanning-led Oregon Ducks. And John would like to say, get used to saying Indiana by 2 touchdowns. Now, I like it. I like it, John. That's good. I like that. I like you guys throwing in it. Blair, I thank you, partner. And if you hit the like and subscribe button and share and bring a friend with you next time, I appreciate it as well. But I appreciate you guys being here this evening. So let's get rolling on here with the Oregon Ducks. This is just not another game. This is a primetime national TV event with huge college football playoff implications, especially if Indiana goes into Oregon 2-0 over the previous 2 games against Illinois and Iowa. Illinois will be a test of legitimacy. Iowa will be a test of toughness. Oregon will be a test of pure talent. This game that determines if Indiana is just a good Big Ten team or a true Big Ten Conference contender and a repeat college football playoff team. Can you imagine what a win in Oregon would do? It would be one of the biggest regular season victories in program history, period. And they haven't beaten a team like Oregon since they upset Penn State in Bloomington during the COVID games. And that says a lot right there, and as it pertains to everything that Indiana has to do. Oregon last year, 13-1, 9-0 in the Big Ten, over under this year, 10.5, conference title odds, plus 350. And Dan Lanning is only in his 4th season, coming from Georgia, where he helped the Bulldogs to a numerous amount of big-time ball games. So you can see why that is a huge, huge game for Indiana. But as we know, Oregon has been a big-time ball club, and they're going to be a team that has a new quarterback. Illinois, by far, is the team that probably has the most in some respects because they've got a battle-tested quarterback in Altmyer. But the problem with them is if he becomes one-dimensional, it's very hard on him because you have to limit his throws per game. He's a great 50-50 type of guy with an offense that can run the ball. The Oregon Ducks under Lanning are a perennial powerhouse and a real threat to win the national title. They're coming off a monster first season in the Big Ten that saw them win the Big Ten Conference Championship. And right now, they enter the 2025 season as a consensus top 5 team, with some polls even pegging them as the favorite to win the conference again. This program is one that doesn't rebuild. It reloads. And that is a very, very true statement. Yeah, I can see that as well. And then Chris had a comment here too, and try to get that in. He says he hopes Cignetti will go back and watch the game with Indiana, was ranked 17th at the start of the season. They go to Iowa, got routed big time, and Signetti will need to bring it going to Iowa. And I'm sure you referenced the Tom Allen era, and you're correct. They went out there and got throttled in that ball game. It wasn't a very pretty sight to see when it came down to it with Oregon with Iowa in Iowa City that year. Offensively, the Ducks have to replace their Heisman finalist quarterback, but they have two elite options ready to go. The presumed starter is Dante Moore, a former top recruit from UCLA, who spent last year learning the system. He has immense talent and a huge arm. And he'll be playing behind an offensive line that many consider to be one of the top 5 offensive lines in the country, and anchored by a future first-round pick in Isaiah World. They had an absolute stud at running back in Micaiah Hughes, a transfer from Tulane, who was the top running back in the portal after a phenomenal run of production. And as you can see right there, their offensive coordinators, Stein and Lupo, are both in their third year, came with Lanning. He's had a lot of staff continuity in his short tenure as a head coach, very similar to what Cignetti has in terms of keeping guys on their staff. 13-1 a year ago, 34, almost 35 points a game, 437 yards. And you look at that defense, 316 yards a game and only 19 points. As good as their offense is, their defense might even be better. Lanning, a defensive guru when he was at Georgia, has built up a unit that's elite at all 3 levels. Up front, they have one of the nation's best pass rushers, and Mateo Uolangale. Their linebacker core is led by tackling machine Bryce Bochetter, and their secondary is loaded, featuring another elite transfer in safety, Dylan Thyman from Purdue. And he is a darn good football player, as we have witnessed in Indiana over the last 3 seasons. A freshman, when he came in, started as a true freshman. It would have been nice keeping him in the Midwest, but he has ventured out to Oregon, where they have many experts have ranked their defense among the top 10 in the Big Ten. And as well, their defense among the top 10 in the nation, and no obvious weakness, in a team that has a lot of NFL talent everywhere. And it's built for their championship run. So how in the world can the Hoosiers go into Aztec Stadium, one of the loudest venues in America, and pull off a major upset, something that would shock the world? The path is going to be very narrow, but it's one that exists. The offense is going to have to be fearless against the Ducks. Definitely not play scared. And one thing about Aztec Stadium, it may be the loudest stadium, or at least one of the loudest stadiums in the country, as I show some highlights from their spring game this past spring. It is a loud stadium in Indiana. When they went to Columbus to take on Ohio State, had trouble from the snap there in Columbus handling the noise. The coaching staff has to scheme up ways to create mismatches and get the ball to our playmakers, especially in space. That means utilizing misdirections, motions, RPO game, and then, of course, taking the deep shots or back shoulder throw. One thing for Mendoza, he's played against Oregon at Oregon, so he knows what the Hoosiers will face. He will have to have one of his top games of his life, but he has to stand in the pocket against the pass rush and deliver the ball down the field. This also is a game where our unproven running backs, led by Maryland transfer Roman Hemby, have to find a way to be effective to keep the Oregon defense honest. And Hemby brings the punch. And Coach Signetti spoke very highly of the man's work ethic. So you add Black, Hemby, and BB Jr. in that backfield. Indiana's trio back there is going to be one that I think will be very, very good amongst the Big Ten. And John says, I bet Sig won't use that silent count. I doubt he will either, John. I think he kind of let that be known that he won't be doing that anymore. The defense in this game has to generate pressure on apparent starter Dante Moore. He has an incredible talent, but he is still a young quarterback who hasn't played a ton of meaningful snaps in this offense as he's thrown here on the highlights. If the Hoosiers can get constant pressure with their front four, led by Kamara, without having to bring a blitz all the time, they could force him in mistakes and into 3rd and longs. The third and maybe the most important key is to survive Oregon's opening punch. They are known for their fast starts at home. The first quarter at Oregon can be an avalanche of noise and points that buries teams, a la Ohio State. Indiana has to survive it. They have to get a few first downs or even get a stop on defense. And at Ohio State a year ago, they actually took their opening drive and went down and put 7 points on the board. They have to prove to themselves and the crowd that they won't be intimidated. Indiana has to keep the game close into the second half, where the pressure will start to shift and the idea of a massive upset starts to feel real. Had Indiana last year against Ohio State held their poise, especially in that second quarter, they probably are tied or just down a field goal in that game against Ohio State, and everything changes in the second half. Winning in Eugene is a big task. But for Indiana, this game is a golden opportunity. A loss is what most of the country expects, but a win changes everything. It validates everything in the 2024 season completely. It rockets us and the Hoosiers in the rankings and gives them a signature opportunity to change the face of college football's landscape. It also will be impossible for the playoff committee to ignore a win, not only in Iowa City, but if the future opportunity that Eugene, Oregon presents to Indiana, the playoff committee will not be able to ignore a win there. It would announce that the Hoosiers are just not here, they're here to stay. So there's the first 3 games of this Big Ten schedule. And in just a second, I'm going to talk about what I feel are the keys for them winning games against Illinois, Iowa, and Oregon. Because that ultimately is what these 3 games come down to, in my opinion. And this is going to be something that, as a evaluator, as a former coach who's coached in environments that Indiana is going to go play against, like I coached in against Clemson and Death Valley and the Rock. I've coached in the Swamp against Steve Spurrier when he was at Florida. Coached against Lou Holtz when he was at South Carolina. Those are these games that are the games that Indiana has to expect to win. No more wishing or hoping to win. these 3 games are definitely what I call a very big gauntlet of games and 3 huge challenges to kick off the Big Ten season. Now, a year ago with Nebraska and Washington coming in, everybody thought those 2 were going to be tough ball games. You had the former national runner-up and the former national champion in Michigan on the schedule, not to forget about Ohio State's legacy. And you looked at that schedule as a little daunting to start with, but you had some belief in that the fact that Nebraska had a young quarterback and Rule was in his 2nd season, and Washington had lost their coach to Alabama and graduated a big part of that roster, and Jedd Fisch got a late start. But looking at these 3 games, there's been no turnover in coaches or staff, and all 3 have legitimate quarterbacks that can beat you. It will be a game, 3 games against a very talented 3 quarterbacks, and Mendoza will have to play elite in those 3 games. Now, what I'm going to do here, it's time for me to look at it and say what is going to happen with these 3 games, or what I think will happen with these 3 games, and how Indiana will do, and what does it mean for the playoffs potentially. And we're going to do it by going game by game to finish out the night. The home opener in Illinois against Illinois is a big game. Said it. It is a Big Ten kickoff, and that's not to slight the 3 games before that, because you got Old Dominion that starts everything off. A stumble there makes all of this for naught, because they cannot have a stumble against Old Dominion or Kennesaw State in those first 2 ball games. So this Big Ten opener against Illinois may be the most pivotal game of the year on Indiana's schedule. When I look at this game right now, I think it's a toss-up. But the biggest thing that Indiana has going for them, it's at home in Memorial Stadium. And Memorial Stadium has to be a fortress. It has to be loud. And there has to be no seats available for Illinois faithful to purchase beyond their allotment. That has happened many times in Indiana Stadium when they've taken on Big Ten opponents. Indiana must gobble up the tickets, and that crowd will be a pivotal component to that game. Illinois is experienced. They have an experienced coach. He likes physical football. But I think Indiana has 2 of the most dynamic offensive players in Mendoza and Surratt, and that's not to mention Omar Cooper or Bird, who came from Cal, or Hemby or Black. Illinois' questions at wide receiver are a real problem against Indiana's talented secondary that I believe can play man-to-man coverage, or what I call man-free with a safety high, and force Luke Altmyer into bad decision-making and sacks. In a back-and-forth fight, I'm giving the edge to Indiana at home with a win, 24-17 Hoosiers. I do think Indiana beats Illinois at home. Now, here's the tough one. And this is not even talking about Oregon. Their trip to Iowa, everybody will count Indiana out in that ball game. I believe they will be a 3 to 6 point underdog heading in to Iowa City. And winning there in Iowa City in Kinnick Stadium is a rite of passage in most college football coaches' eyes. But this is not the Indiana of old. This is Coach Signetti, who gets satisfaction on any given Saturday of lining up and kicking somebody's ass, whether it's in the Rose Bowl or the parking lot there in Iowa City. He will have Indiana ready to play a 60-minute war. But so will Curt. And I know Tim Luster, the offensive coordinator, and he is a very good offensive-minded coach and will be a challenge for Brian Haynes-led defense. But I think the advantage in this game, even though they have a talented quarterback themselves, will be the passing game. Iowa is still a ground and pound team. Indiana has to exploit Phil Parker's defense with the RPO game and dictate, like they did against Nebraska a year ago, what they will do and impose their will on Iowa's defense. Fernando has to have poise. He has to stand in the pocket. He has to hit the receivers that are open and go through his reads. And when the big play presents itself, he has to make it. That will test a questionable Hawkeye secondary. But it's going to be tough, and at times it may look ugly against Phil Parker, the defensive coordinator at Iowa, who's had some of the best defenses in the Big Ten over the last 8 to 10 years. But this one, I'm giving Indiana the win on the road in Kinnick Stadium, as Curt Signetti has the boys ready for their first road trip in the Big Ten in the 2025 season with a 17-10 win on the road, setting up for a third game out in Oregon that will have the nation buzzing if Indiana would happen to go into Eugene 5-0 with wins over Illinois and Iowa. The biggest problem in that game will be traveling clear across the country to face a national audience against the Ducks. There's no question the Oregons of the world or the Ohio States of the world or Texases of the world or Alabamas of the world, their talent level is on another level. It just is. And Indiana faced problems in those games last year, second half at Michigan, Ohio State, and then against Notre Dame, and a talent differential, and it mostly showed up along the offensive line. Oregon has depth and speed, and they are tough to beat at home. But Indiana and Coach Signetti have shown that when they go into tough environments, they will lay it on the line and fight tooth and nail against any team, irregardless of who they are. But the Ducks' ability to pressure the quarterback and create explosive players will eventually wear Indiana down, as was the case against Ohio State, as well as Notre Dame. Oregon is a legitimate national title contender. It's no secret. Dan Lanning is a great coach and has resurrected Eugene to the era of Chip Kelly when he had Marcus Mariota as the quarterback, and they had the teams that went in to play for the national championships. Don't hate me, because this is just a prediction and has no bearing on what may or may not happen. But I do think Oregon wins the game in Eugene. Do I think it's a blowout? No. But if Indiana gets into a shootout with them, I think they lose 37-30. And that's how I see the Indiana Hoosiers in their first 3 Big Ten games of the season in 2025, 2-1 heading into the rest of the year. It keeps Indiana squarely in a at-large playoff conversation. If they play Oregon tough and come away 2-1, they are going to be considered a playoff team. But it likely means a potential 10-2 team overall, or potentially 11-1 finish is right there. But remember, that type of outcome would answer the initial question, was 2024 a fluke? The answer would be a resounding no, because Curt Signetti has raised the floor and the ceiling of the Hoosier program. The Hoosiers are now a consistent caliber type of team that is no longer the easy out. This proves that the gap on the conference elites has narrowed. A 2-1 record sets up the back half of the season, just like Indiana reeling off 6-0 start last year did. But remember, in November, there's another big game looming, and it's not Purdue. It's in Happy Valley against the Nittany Lions, who are the odds-on favorite to win the Big Ten and potentially a national championship for Coach James Franklin there in Happy Valley. Jim Knowles is their new defensive coordinator, as Tom Allen has left and gone to Clemson. Andy Kolanecki is back as their offensive coordinator. And wouldn't it be something if Indiana strolls in with a one-loss record, only losing maybe to Oregon, and that game being a whiteout? Can Indiana maintain the momentum of 2024? I think they can. And I believe that the 3-game crucible that will define Indiana's season will be Illinois, Iowa, Oregon. It's a brutal test on the road at Iowa, and then, of course, on a national stage like Oregon. It's a test of whether the magic of 2024 was a fleeting moment or the dawn of a new era for the Hoosiers. My prediction of 2-1 is just that, a prediction. The game is played between the white lines. But this means Indiana will not just solidify its identity as a tough, competitive Big Ten program, but will prove Indiana's legitimate playoff contender once again. It proved in 2024 wasn't a fluke. Curt Signetti has fundamentally changed the atmosphere, the culture in Bloomington, sustaining that absolute peak, especially so much of the roster turnover, is a monumental task. But this team, I believe, will be ready. The 3-game stretch will likely serve as confirmation of Indiana's new status as it recalibrates expectations, shifting the conversation from can they do it again to how far can they go? The journey to sustain excellence is a long one, and for the Indiana Hoosiers, emerging from this fire with 2 wins would prove that the 2025 season is just the next crucial and maybe even more exciting chapter in the Curt Signetti era. But that's just my take, Hoosier fans. I want to know what you think, and am I being too optimistic at 2-1? Do you see us running the gauntlet and merging with 2 wins or 3? Or do you feel like Derby and think the Hoosiers lose all 3 of them? Will the roster turnover be too much to overcome? Let me know your predictions for this 3-game stretch against Illinois, Iowa, and Oregon down in the comments. I read every single one of them and even will reply. But let me know what your thoughts are on this 3-game stretch. Remember to catch me next week on another edition of the Hoosier Tailgate. We'll take the next 3 games of the schedule and talk in depth about them as well, because we are now beyond the halfway point of the season with 6 games of the 2025 schedule behind us. So join me next Thursday, 7:30, right here on the Hoosier.com's YouTube channel, as well as at Hoosier Tailgate on Twitter or X, as it's said. Or you can also pick me up on my YouTube channel, the Hoosier Tailgate. Thanks for joining me tonight. I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith, and you've been watching the Hoosier Tailgate here on thehoosier.com. Everybody have a great evening, and we'll see you next Thursday at 7:30.